Bab As-Salat. This is the magnificent entrance to paradise, reserved for those whose earthly lives were deeply defined by their steadfast commitment to prayer. In the Islamic tradition, prayer is the central pillar of faith, serving as a continuous, daily lifeline between the creation and the Creator. While observing the 5 obligatory daily prayers is a fundamental requirement for every Muslim, those who are specifically called to enter through this honorable gate are the individuals who perfected this practice with extraordinary dedication. They did not view prayer as a heavy burden or a mere ritual to be rushed through, but rather as the profound joy and ultimate sanctuary of their hearts. These believers meticulously guarded their ablution, walking to the prayer in states of purity, and stood before Allah with deep reverence and humility known as khushu. Their bodies were present, but more importantly, their minds and souls were fully engaged, entirely disconnected from the distractions of the worldly life during those precious moments. Furthermore, they distinguished themselves by abundantly performing voluntary prayers alongside the obligations. They were the ones who would rise in the quiet, dark hours of the night to perform the Tahajjud prayer, while the rest of the world was fast asleep, shedding tears of repentance and gratitude in their private seclusion with their Lord. They consistently offered the mid-morning duha prayer, and they carefully maintained the recommended sunnah prayers before and after the daily obligations. The Prophet Muhammad taught that the very first deed a person will be questioned about on the Day of Judgment is their prayer, and if this foundation is sound, all other deeds will be elevated. Entering through this specific gate is a divine acknowledgement of the physical fatigue, the sacrificed sleep, and the unwavering mental focus these believers dedicated to their worship. The angels will welcome them, recognizing that the foreheads that frequently touch the ground in humble prostration have now earned them an everlasting life of unimaginable honor. By making the remembrance of Allah through prayer their absolute highest priority, organizing their schedules around the divine call rather than shaping their worship around their worldly desires, they are granted a specialized entry that celebrates their profound and unbreakable connection to the Almighty. Bab Al-Jihad. This gate stands as a monumental honor for those who dedicated their lives, wealth, and profound efforts to the honorable struggle for the sake of Allah. In its most comprehensive Islamic understanding, the concept of striving encompasses both the internal battle against one's own lower desires and the external exertion to establish justice, protect the innocent, and uphold the truth in the face of falsehood and oppression. Those invited to cross the threshold of this specific gate are the brave and selfless souls who never hesitated to sacrifice their personal comfort, their worldly possessions, and even their very lives when the defense of the faith required it. They demonstrated unmatched courage on the battlefield, standing firm in the face of terrifying odds, motivated entirely by a sincere desire to seek the pleasure of their Creator, rather than pursuing worldly fame, political power, or material spoils of war. This high honor also profoundly recognizes the spiritual resilience of those who endure immense hardships and physical suffering while remaining patient and firmly upon the straight path. The Islamic tradition places a tremendously high value on the ultimate sacrifice, teaching that the martyrs are not truly dead, but are alive and uniquely sustained in the presence of their Lord, enjoying the earliest fruits of paradise long before the Day of Judgment. However, the calling from this gate also extends to those who strive diligently in all righteous capacities, defending the vulnerable, speaking words of truth to unjust rulers, and pouring their wealth into causes that uplift the religion and the community. Their earthly existence was characterized by continuous motion, noble exhaustion, and a refusal to remain passively on the sidelines when their faith demanded action. They understood that the temporary comforts of this worldly life pale in comparison to the eternal peace promised by Allah, and thus they traded their fleeting moments for everlasting glory. As they approach this gate on the day of resurrection, their earthly wounds and the physical marks of their struggles will be transformed into sources of radiant light and beautiful fragrance, bearing undeniable witness to their sincerity. The angels will greet them with peace, acknowledging that their tireless efforts, their spilled blood, and their unwavering conviction have ultimately secured for them the highest degrees of tranquility and divine pleasure. Bab As-Sadaqah. This is the beautiful gateway designated exclusively for the generous souls who freely and consistently spent their wealth in charity to uplift others and seek the countless blessings of Allah. Wealth in the Islamic worldview is understood to be a temporary trust given by the Creator to test human beings, and those called to this gate are the ones who pass this test with remarkable excellence. They completely fulfilled the obligatory charity known as zakat, perfectly purifying their assets without hesitation. But their generosity did not stop at the bare minimum requirement. They continually offered voluntary charity, actively searching for the poor, the orphans, the widows, and the indebted, giving from what they loved most. These believers spent their resources both in times of immense prosperity and in times of personal financial hardship, proving that their reliance was entirely upon the provider rather than the provision itself. They gave their wealth publicly when it served as an encouragement to the community, and they gave secretly in the darkness of night to protect the dignity of the recipients, ensuring that their left hand did not know what their right hand was spending. Such profound sincerity protected their hearts from the spiritual diseases of greed, arrogance, and materialism. The Prophet Muhammad taught that charity never decreases wealth, but rather blesses it, purifies it, and serves as a powerful shield against divine anger and the trials of the grave. Those who enter through this gate understood that whatever they hoarded in this life would ultimately perish, but whatever they gave away for the sake of Allah was permanently deposited into their heavenly accounts. Furthermore, their charity was not strictly limited to money. They understood that offering a warm smile, removing a harmful obstacle from the road, sharing beneficial knowledge, and speaking kind words to a broken heart were all valuable forms of giving. On the chaotic and intensely hot day of judgment, when humanity is gathered under the terrifying heat of the sun, these deeply generous individuals will be comfortably shaded by the very charity they offered in the world. As they are warmly invited through this magnificent gate, they will find that every single coin, every plate of food, and every hidden act of kindness has been multiplied by their Lord, entirely transforming their earthly generosity into palaces and gardens of unimaginable splendor. Bab Ar-Rayyan. This is the remarkably unique and exclusive gate reserved solely for those who devoted themselves to the deeply spiritual practice of fasting for the sake of Allah. The very name of this gate carries a profound linguistic meaning, rooted in hydration, lushness, and the ultimate quenching of thirst, serving as a poetic and divine contrast to the dry mouths and intense physical thirst experienced by the fasting believers during the long, hot days of their earthly lives. Fasting holds a distinctly special status in Islamic worship because it is inherently hidden. While a person can pray or give charity in front of others, abstaining from food, drink, and intimate desires is a quiet, internal secret held purely between the servant and the Creator. Because of this unparalleled sincerity, Allah has promised that the reward for fasting is not calculated by angels, but is directly given by Him in a magnitude that defies human comprehension. Those who are called to enter through this gate are the individuals who not only meticulously observed the obligatory fasts of the holy month of Ramadan, but who also decorated their entire year with numerous voluntary fasts. They regularly fasted on Mondays and Thursdays, observed the middle days of the lunar month, and eagerly anticipated the sacred fasting days of Ashura and Arafah. During their fasts, they did not merely starve their bodies, but they successfully disciplined their tongues against backbiting, shielded their eyes from prohibited sights, and guarded their hearts from anger and malice. They experienced the physical weakness of hunger, yet their souls grew incredibly strong, elevated by their constant awareness of God. The Prophet Muhammad beautifully described that the breath of a fasting person, though perhaps unpleasant to human senses, is more beloved to Allah than the scent of the finest musk. On the incredibly arduous day of resurrection, when humanity is plagued by an unbearable and desperate thirst, those who suppressed their physical appetites for Allah will be called to this gate. Once the final fasting person has crossed its threshold, the gate will be permanently closed, ensuring its absolute exclusivity. Whoever enters through it will drink from the rivers of paradise, guaranteeing that they will never experience the pain of thirst again for all of eternity. Bab Al-Hajj. This spectacular entrance to paradise is dedicated to those who undertook the profound physical, financial, and spiritual journey to perform the sacred pilgrimage to the house of Allah in Mecca. In the Islamic faith, the pilgrimage is an incredibly demanding pillar that requires a person to leave behind the comforts of their home, separate from their beloved families, and completely strip away all outward markers of worldly status, wealth, and societal rank. Those who are honored to pass through this gate answered the ancient call of the Prophet Abraham, arriving in the sacred precincts covered in simple, unstitched white garments that starkly remind them of the humble shrouds in which they will eventually be buried. They spent their hard-earned wealth not on lavish worldly vacations, but on a difficult and exhausting journey solely to seek the pleasure and forgiveness of their Creator. These devoted believers patiently endured the intense heat, the overwhelming crowds, and the physical fatigue of circling the Kaaba, running between the hills of Safa and Marwa, and standing in deep, tearful supplication on the plains of Mount Arafat. They completed these rites with pure intentions, ensuring their pilgrimage was entirely free from arguments, obscenity, and showing off. The Prophet Muhammad taught that an accepted and righteous pilgrimage has absolutely no reward other than paradise itself, and that the one who completes it returns home as entirely free of sin as the very day their mother gave birth to them. The people called from this gate carried the profound spiritual transformation of their journey throughout the rest of their earthly lives, demonstrating elevated manners and an unshakable attachment to their Lord. They frequently followed up their obligatory pilgrimage with voluntary visits for Umrah, continually returning to the holy sanctuary out of an immense, burning love for Allah and His Messenger. When they ultimately stand on the Day of Judgment, the hardships they bore in the crowded valleys of Mecca will be transformed into ease and brilliant light. The angels will welcome these weary travelers into a permanent heavenly sanctuary where they will never face exhaustion again, honoring their immense dedication in answering the divine invitation and completing the journey of a lifetime. Bab Al-Aman. This majestic gate, often referred to as the Gate of the Right or the Gate of the Righteous, represents an incredibly elite and unique entry point into paradise, designated for those extraordinary believers who are granted admission without facing any reckoning or punishment whatsoever. In the vast and terrifying expanses of the Day of Judgment, when every human being is desperately terrified of having their worldly deeds scrutinized and weighed, the people of this gate are granted absolute amnesty and supreme peace. The profound characteristic that distinguishes these individuals is their perfected state of tawakkul, which is an absolute, unwavering, and unshakable trust and reliance upon Allah in every single aspect of their lives. They lived their earthly existence deeply anchored in the knowledge that everything comes from their Creator, entirely surrendering their hearts to the divine decree, whether it brought them times of joyous ease or periods of severe and painful hardship. Because their trust was so complete, they completely refrained from utilizing superstitions. They never sought out omens or lucky charms, and they did not rely on forbidden spiritual practices to cure their ailments, choosing instead to depend entirely upon the ultimate healing and protection of God. They took practical actions in their daily lives, but their hearts were never attached to those actions. Their hearts were securely fastened to the Lord of the worlds. The Islamic traditions describe these exceptional souls as a distinct group among the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, numbering in the tens of thousands, whose faces will shine with brilliant radiance like the full moon on a dark night. They never succumb to despair. They never complain to the creation about the trials sent by the Creator, and they maintained a pure, quiet dignity in all circumstances. Their faith was not merely a set of ritual actions, but a deeply embedded theological certainty that directed their every breath. When the terrifying accounting begins for the rest of humanity, these exceptionally trusting believers will be gracefully directed towards this gate, completely bypassing the terror of the scales and the questioning. It is a profound divine reward mirroring their own earthly state. Because they did not question Allah's wisdom in the world, Allah will not question their deeds in the hereafter, inviting them into eternal safety through this glorious entrance. Bab al-Qadimina al-Gate. This deeply profound and emotionally significant gate is prepared exclusively for those remarkably noble individuals who actively swallowed their severe anger and chose to pardon others when they were wronged. In the comprehensive moral framework of Islam, true strength is not defined by physical dominance or the ability to defeat opponents in a fight, but rather by the immense psychological and spiritual power to control oneself during moments of intense frustration and emotional provocation. The believers who will be joyously called to enter through this gate experienced all the natural human feelings of betrayal, disrespect, and profound annoyance during their earthly lives. However, instead of retaliating, lashing out, or seeking perfectly justified revenge, they completely contained their fury, extinguishing the destructive fires of rage for the sake of earning Allah's pleasure. They were deeply wronged, yet they recognized that the person who hurt them was also a flawed creation, and they chose to extend mercy rather than demanding harsh justice. More importantly, they advanced past simply holding in their anger. They actively forgave those who mistreated them, completely wiping the slate clean and even showing kindness to their oppressors. The Quran beautifully praises those who restrain their anger and pardon humanity, explicitly stating that Allah loves those who do such profound good. These individuals thoroughly understood that every human being desperately needs the forgiveness of their Creator, and they internalized the powerful teaching that Allah will show mercy to those who show mercy to others. By forgiving the faults of the people around them, they effectively secured the divine forgiveness for their own personal shortcomings. The Prophet Muhammad emphasized that whoever restrains their anger while possessing the absolute power and capability to exact revenge will be called by Allah in front of the entirety of creation on the Day of Judgment, to be tremendously honored and rewarded. When these incredibly patient and emotionally intelligent believers arrive at this gate, they will experience a profound, eternal peace that directly mirrors the peace they generously gifted to their families, friends, and communities in the worldly life. Their hearts, which previously bore the painful weight of swallowed pride and suppressed frustration, will be infinitely expanded with joy as they cross the threshold into a realm where resentment, bitterness, and anger absolutely do not exist. Bab Ar-Dhikr. This luminous and tranquil gate is reserved for the devoted individuals whose earthly lives were continuously illuminated by the constant and sincere remembrance of Allah. While engaging in remembrance is seemingly the lightest physical action, requiring only the gentle movement of the tongue and the conscious presence of the mind, it carries unimaginable weight on the divine scales. The people who are invited through this incredibly special gate are those who never allowed their hearts to become heedless or disconnected from their Creator, regardless of how aggressively the worldly life demanded their attention. They remembered Allah while they were standing in their workplaces, while they were sitting with their families, and while they were lying on their sides before sleep entirely overtook them. Their tongues were constantly moist with words of absolute glorification, frequent praise, declarations of divine oneness, and expressions of supreme greatness. When they looked at the beauty of the natural world, it prompted them to praise the designer, and when they faced sudden distress, their immediate reflex was to seek refuge in the sustainer. They actively sought out the blessed gatherings of knowledge and remembrance in the mosques and community spaces, knowing that these peaceful gatherings are constantly surrounded by throngs of descending angels and covered by the infinite mercy of God. For these exceptionally mindful believers, the remembrance of Allah was not an empty robotic chant, but a deeply transformative practice that actively polished their hearts, removing the rust of worldly anxiety, sinful desires, and spiritual apathy. The Quran clearly states that it is only through the remembrance of Allah that hearts can ever find true rest, and these individuals prove the reality of that promise by living lives of profound contentment. The Prophet Muhammad explained that a person who remembers their Lord compared to one who does not is exactly like the living compared to the dead. As these spiritually vibrant souls approach this gate on the vast and terrifying day of resurrection, they will be enveloped in an unparalleled sense of calm and heavenly security. The beautiful phrases they whispered in the quiet moments of their lives will manifest as guiding lights, naturally leading them through the entrance into the eternal gardens. Upon stepping through this final magnificent threshold, their worldly practice of remembrance will seamlessly transition into an everlasting state of joyous praise, surrounded by the breathtaking reality of the Lord they never once forgot.